All right, I want to show you how to use Report Builder to create a report that is a chart. So there's a couple aspects to it. One is just knowing how to do it in Report Builder, and the other is understanding the data and how you're going to create a chart from it. So let's take a look at this table we have here. This is just a list of videos, and it's got some categories for the videos. So let's say for the sake of this example, we want to create a chart that looks kind of like this, where we have the categories down here, and we have drama, comedy, etc. And then over here we have a count of how many videos for each category. So that's kind of how we want to envision our chart. So the key is looking in that table and getting two fields. The only field we really want to be concerned with is the category field. We definitely need that field, and then we can basically just choose any other field, and we'll just count that. So it doesn't really matter what's in there. We'll have the categories down here, which are important, and then we can just do a count on one other field. So that's kind of how you have to look at the data you're getting and how you're going to produce a chart from it. So let's go into Report Builder and create this. So when you start up Report Builder, you're going to do New Report, but this time you're going to do Chart Wizard. So let's click that. And this is similar to creating a regular report. We have to create a data set, so we have to select that, hit Next. We have to hit New here. We have to put in a connection string. And we have to create a query here that's going to get those two fields. Typically, when you're creating a chart in a report, you're only going to pull down two fields. So with a normal query, you might pull 4 or 5 fields, but with a chart, you're typically only going to get 2. So I'm going to select 2 specific fields from my table there, category, and I'll just get tape num as the other one. So this is still similar to creating a normal report, but in a moment we'll see where the chart portion comes in. So we've got 2 fields here. Here's where you'll choose the chart type. Typically, if you have 2 fields, you're going to do a column or a bar. Column's the most common, so I'm going to do that. But this step is important. So we have these 2 fields, but where we put them over here is important. So for that stuff that we want running along the bottom, that's going to be our category. So in this case, it happens to have the same name, so we're going to pull that field into that box there. And then the other one that you're just going to count typically, or sum up, in this case we're going to count it, we're going to drag that second field into the values. Now when we're doing a chart like this, we're going to need to do something over here with the values. Typically it's going to be count. So what I'm going to do here, I've got one field there, one field there. In the values field, I'm going to click count on that one. That should produce the chart result that we want. Unfortunately, the previews on this aren't very good, so we're just going to finish it and then go look at the data here once we have our chart created. So once we have this created, I'm going to hit run here, and hopefully we'll get a result similar to what we were hoping for. So there we go. we can see that. And again, this is a chart. If it's a pie chart or whatever, you sort of have to eyeball it. But we can see that we have about 6 action. We just have a few of these other categories. We have quite a few dramas. If you mouse over it, you can see the actual values. Let's do one other thing, and that's really it for the basics of creating a chart. Let's do one other thing here. A lot of times you might have several categories, or if you feel like these are a little bit scrunched up, you can certainly, in your chart design, drag the page over so it's larger, and then also stretch your chart out. So our categories, we didn't have that many, but sometimes you might have 8, 9, 10 categories. So to create space, you can see them all. You can certainly redesign your chart. That's really the basics of it. But what I want to show you is, for the second part of this video, is a slightly more complex chart, because your data is not always going to be simple and easy like this. And let me show you an example of kind of what I mean. So I'm going to create a different chart here. So again, first we need to I want to understand what we're trying to create a chart from, and then go into Report Builder and create it. So here I've got a different table. I've got some visits to, say, a dentist's office that occur on different days and so forth. So maybe this time around I want a chart of the various days and how many visits we had on those days. The problem with producing a chart, let's say if that was your requirement, producing a chart like that, is we have so many different days. We're going to have this huge chart with, January 13th, January 14th, January 15th. So you're going to have so many categories, it's not going to be a very useful chart. So in that situation, what we might want to do is just say, okay, show me all the visits in January, all the visits in February, all the visits in March. Sounds easy enough, but the problem is the data in our table is broken down by day. So if we produce a chart, it's going to have a separate category for, say, May 4th, and a separate category for May 5th, etc., etc. Otherwise, the approach is the same. Let's just create a chart, grab visit date here, and maybe patient ID. So again, we're going to grab 2 fields. But I want to show you something we can do to this date field to bunch them up into months instead of just every single individual day. Let's go ahead and create the chart, and then I'll show you the trick on how to do that. So we're going to have to go through kind of the same motions we just did, but in our query we'll do something separate or different to get a useful result on our chart. So this is where it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to select those 2 fields, but we're going to have to do something to this date field to get it in the format that we want. So I'm going to grab patient ID and visit date here. But again, notice we have several things in November of 2001, but instead of all bunched together, they are separate. They're going to be separate. So it's going to produce a very big chart with tons of categories. So what we can do here is take these dates and put them into a category where we just see month and year instead of month, day, year. So the trick to that, and this is kind of a universal trick to use not just in charts but in SQL, for the visit date, I'm going to do a format function on it in my query. And this is going to be useful for our chart later. So I'm going to do format, put parentheses around visit date, and inside there I'm going to put a comma, and inside single quotes I'm going to put this into 4-digit year dash 2-digit month. So basically I'm going to take this day, month, day, year, format it differently, but it's important because then we can group all these together in our chart. So that part of the query is important. Other than that, pretty much the same thing as we did before. We can go to column. We can do a bar chart if we want. Let's do column. Don't forget on this step, we want the category, which would be the date. Since I did a function on it, it gave it a different name. We're just going to put that into the category area. And then patient ID is what we're going to count. So we're going to put that under values. Just like we did before, let's count it. And just like before, we won't really be able to see our results in the preview. We'll have to finish it up and then go run it to see what we ended up with. So like I mentioned, the table from the data would have given us a bunch of different categories. But notice what we got here instead is just a few categories. Instead of maybe 70 or 80, we looks like we got about 12 or 13, which is what we want. So obviously we didn't have 40 visits in one day, but in that 1 month, whatever that month is, we had 40 visits. One more thing I want to show you in this video, we might as well show you because it's important or pertains to this chart that it produced. We need to stretch this out, but notice it doesn't show us all our months. Let's go ahead and stretch it out like we talked about before. But even when we do that, in this report builder, for whatever reason, it still doesn't show us all our months. It kind of shows us every few months. So I want to show you how to fix that. Let's go back to design. There's 2 or 3 important steps on this. We're going to go to design. We're going to click on the chart, but we're going to click down here where that, I guess, horizontal axis or whatever it is. All right. So that's important. We want that to be selected. All right. So when you click the chart, make sure you click that axis because that's what we want to show more of those values on. Then we have to go up here to view and turn on our properties. And this is going to be the properties for that horizontal axis. One thing we want to change for the label interval, we can't select it, we just have to type 1 in there. So type 1 in label interval, maybe click out of it, and then let's go back and run that again. Notice now, we could zoom in on this, but notice now we have every single month listed, so we can see if we zoom in that for January of 2002, we had about 6 visits. Feel free to review this video to go over some of that data, but that's basically a couple different ways to create some charts in Report Builder.